There were so many late nights, hard work, jobs I didn't get, internships I was rejected from, no's that later maybe turned into yeses, but some of them just stayed no's. And that isn't always seen, particularly in this highlight culture that we live in now. When I got to the University of Portland, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And I get so many calls from students now. I get emails and I try to respond to as many of them as I can because I remember being that student. And I get these emails from these wonderful students who are doing all the right things. I'm a freshman and I'm working for my school paper and I have an internship here and I volunteer here and I'm doing all of the right things. I didn't know going into university that I wanted to go into journalism. I always loved to write. I always loved to listen to other people's stories. And I was curious about how we could continue to bring truth to light and keep authority checked. I always found all of that to be fascinating, but I never saw the Rubik's Cube come together as, oh, journalism is sort of what does this, as sort of the checks and balances of the powers of society. And so getting to the University of Portland, honestly, I have a best friend. Her name is Claire Duffy. She worked for the school paper. I admired the daylight out of her. And I thought, and she worked for the school paper. And I thought, you know what? I want to get involved with an extracurricular. I want to spend more time around this supernova of a woman. And I get to write too. And so that was sort of my first foray into journalism, was really wanting to spend more time and explore in this space with a friend of mine. And so I did. And I fell in love very, very quickly and wrote stories where I saw writing that the university needed to do something and listening to experts say that and me writing it and then seeing those tweaks and changes be made was a pretty empowering thing that I just said, you know what, I really can see myself doing this for a long time.
I mean, I feel like that really captures the experience of picking a major, though, where you're
Right.
like,
You're
my
like,
friend's doing it.
less math. I got it.
Yeah, it was the same for me, where you're like, I don't know. It's such a young age to decide.
And there's more and more pressure now to get it right immediately. And so what I try to tell those students, and it's a lot of young women who email me who want to get it right the first time, I try to remind them, knowing that I also didn't take this advice when I reached out. I wanted to know now because I'm an anxious person who needs the certainty that everything is going to be okay. I try to remind them with the kindness of knowing that I wouldn't have taken this advice, but I'm going to give you the advice that I got anyway. And now with hindsight, I can see why it was valuable. It's okay to play. It's okay to explore. It's okay not to do exactly the thing that you want to do right out of the gate and maybe try a couple of things. All of that is okay. We're in this place now where you feel like you see people getting it right and perceive that it's the first time they do it. And maybe it is and maybe it's not, but you have to sit in what's right for you. And that's something that for me came with a little bit of time. I didn't do any journalism my freshman year. It was my sophomore year that I started. And I didn't know that television was where I would end up. I really loved print. I really wanted to continue being a print reporter. And honestly, Sally, I don't know how you feel about this, but I felt really good at it. And I felt strong in walking to a room with a pen and paper and armed with that to tell other people's stories was very comfortable for me. And pushing into television, it was a little bit uncomfortable, particularly at the beginning. And I'm sure you've had that experience where it's like, oh wait, this is the armor I'm comfortable in, and now you're asking me to go into this new or this same room without that armor, and it feels very vulnerable and different.
Yeah, first of all, I'll say that your advice is spot on. And there's a book that I read called Excellent Sheep that talks about
Heard about this.
it's the pressure that young people are under to get it right. And they're aspiring to a really specific thing and a really specific resume. And it is truly the worst thing you can do to yourself, because you land in the consulting job, or as a, you get your doctorate and whatever, and then you're unhappy because you haven't pursued your passion and
Yeah.
you haven't allowed room for learning. Some of my growth came from waiting tables and taking on like hourly jobs and
Yeah.
just working and hustling and learning work ethic from that, learning about myself and learning about people. And I think that is a bit of an afterthought right now for students, and I think they're feeling pressured to, like, immediately succeed because they look to your career, and they think, "Oh, it was so easy, and she's so great, and I wanna be that." And so, I think that you a lot of times it's hard to see what happens behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and there's so much learning in the failure and in the exploration.
100%. And it's sometimes I want to remind I'm 29 years old. I'm so lucky. I've been sprinkled with so much luck and so many wonderful people around me in my life to help me to get to where I am and to believe in me more than I believed in myself in order to be able to have the time and space to grow in the roles that I have. That being said, I feel it when someone says to me, "Well, I just want to do what you do and you made it look easy." And I appreciate that that is a compliment, and I don't want to be the reason that somebody beats themselves up for not getting somewhere right out the gate immediately, because from the outside looking in, I understand how that perception can be there. To your point, there were so many late nights, hard work, jobs I didn't get, internships I was rejected from, no's that later maybe turned into yeses, but some of them just stayed no's. And that isn't always seen, particularly in this highlight culture that we live in now. So I have so much empathy for young women in particular, where that is the path that they are trying to walk. But I also try to remind myself, how lucky are we that we have these get to jobs instead of have to jobs, that we get to explore, that we get to play, that we get to work in sports or fashion or in the business of creating a network of women, which is what you and Argent have done. Like that's just such a lucky place to be.